Hallwood. I'm a toxicologist, so I wanted to tell you about what my career is and what I do. I practice toxicology in the environmental field, so I mostly deal with things if you get exposed to contaminants or pollutants or toxins in the environment. I help people understand what sort of health effects they might have from that environmental exposure to some contamination or pollutants. And how I mostly apply that is to help clean up contaminated sites where we know we have some contamination. I will tell people based on what kinds of chemicals are there and how much chemicals are there, and if it's in the soil or the groundwater or surface water. Depending how people could be exposed to them, I will tell them what levels they should clean up to so that people will not have bad health impacts from that exposure. So I've been doing this for about 20 or more years, and I love it because I still learn something every day. Why I chose this, mostly it was just really interesting, and I always liked sciences and knew I would do something with science, and I liked the environment. So after high school, I went to college for 4 years and got what we call a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sciences. And I really liked environmental sciences, but I have to admit, I kind of liked being in an office like this more than out in the environment. And I also really liked the human body and anatomy and how your body processes things. So I went back to school for another 2 years and got a master's degree in what we call toxicology. So now I study our environmental exposures and how they could impact us. And my typical day, I tend to talk to a lot of people. I sometimes work with engineers, chemists, geologists, sometimes even lawyers, and biologists, lots of other science backgrounds, and we work together to try to understand what kind of contamination is at a site and how we might need to clean that up. So I guess I always was working towards this in my love of science and the environment. But really, it wasn't until I started working and doing what we call internships, which is when you work for free just so you can get some experience and you can learn about jobs. And I learned that this was something that would be really interesting and would keep my attention for a long time. And that's what you want to do when you're picking a career, something that really interests you, that you could see doing for a long time and you won't get bored at. And if you like the sciences and you get a science degree, you can probably figure out a great way to apply that at a job that will keep you interested. And I already talked about my school. Special skills. I think the most important skill you need is communication skills. I know you might have expected me to say math, but really, when we're talking about complicated things like environmental exposures and how they could impact people, you need to be able to communicate sometimes very complex things so everybody understands them. Sometimes we're dealing with contamination in people's drinking water, and we need to be able to explain to them what that contamination might be, why we want to sample their drinking water, and what sort of steps we're going to take to reduce their exposure if they do have these chemicals in their drinking water. So you need to be able to explain to people the importance of testing their drinking water while not making them really scared about what they might be exposed to until we know if these chemicals are in their drinking water. So communication skills, both with your coworkers and the public, is really important. One of my favorite things and one of my challenges is that every site is different. So although I'm always learning, I never really do the same thing twice, which means you got to be on your toes and you got to be ready to treat every site and every project differently. Even if you can learn from what you did in the past, you don't just keep doing the same thing at every site, because that would be boring and then I wouldn't like doing this for 25 years. So it's both interesting, but it's challenging because you always have to learn and think of new ways to analyze different sites and what might be going on there. And salary, I think when I first started with a bachelor's, you don't have as much experience or education, so you tend to start a little lower. So if I said $40,000, that might sound like a lot of money, but it goes pretty quickly, trust me. But as you get more experience and more school and you do it longer, you do get more and more money. You might not become a millionaire doing toxicology, but maybe you could find a different kind of job in toxicology that would make you a millionaire. It's not what I do, but it keeps me interested in learning, so I like it a lot. Thank you, Mrs. Schubart, for letting me tell everybody. And if you guys have any questions, let Mrs. Schubart know and we can get back to you. Bye, Tallwood.